Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. This is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today. It is promptly 1 p.m. We're going to go ahead and get started on our topic here, but a couple technical things before we do. Click on the little red arrow on the sidebar of your webinar control panel if you're using a single monitor setup. Allows you to minimize that, get that out of the way, and get the full visual effect of the presentation. Or drag it out to your second desktop if you've got, two monitors or more. Just to get it out of the way, see everything that you can see on the screen. We're here to talk about printing checks in Church Windows accounting today. Before we, again, we're recording today's event. The video of today's event will be out on our website here sometime in the next day or two. There's one out there from printing checks from a couple versions ago, I'm pretty sure, but we're just trying to update that with our latest and current version. Today's webinar is using the workbook, accounting workbook number 103, A103, pages 39 to 42. So if you have A103, you can turn to page 39. That is the printed material that I am using for the webinar today. If you don't have the workbooks, you can purchase those and download either the PDF document or we can print and send them to you from the training workbooks page on our website. If you have questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel. I'll keep an eye on those, and if I don't answer it during the event, I'll certainly be happy to get to it at the very end. Please keep your questions on topic, meaning about our print checks process in Church Windows accounting. I just may not have what I need to answer other questions you have, and of course our technicians are available and happy to answer questions about Church Windows through 6 p.m. Eastern Time today. So accessing print checks is of course done in a couple different ways. It's technically considered a report since it's something you print from Church Windows, so we can access it right here. A lot of folks, I deal with a lot of support calls on this, so right here under our, that's very strange, I didn't ask for that to come over there, that's weird, that's okay. So right here on the little printer icon where you can see my little poorly drawn circle there, we can access the print checks, or we can go up to reports/exports in the upper left, and then right here to the little left of the tax icon, you've got print checks there as well, okay? So if you have checks waiting to print and you've closed out of that, you can access that in one of two ways. The other option, of course, and this is the one that folks use more often than not, is when we're at the pay bills window and we've got a bill or a payment that we're ready to pay, like right here I've got one for my, say, 941, or sorry, my state tax deposit for, say, Q1 for 22. I can now go down to the bottom right-hand corner down here in the bottom right and choose post and print checks. And what that'll do is when it posts my payment and I close out of that window, it will immediately open up my print checks window ready for me to print my checks. So we're going to do that. We're going to click, I've got my payment, date occurred, asset, amount to pay is right. I'm ready to click post and print checks. It now asks me, do I want to print? This is just a report of my payment transaction, folks, not my actual checks. So I'm going to say no on that. And then what it does now is it'll immediately open up my print checks window with any checks that I have, computer checks that I have waiting to print sitting in the print queue. So we clearly see that I have several other checks waiting here that I had posted, say, earlier from maybe bills that I'd entered where I'd also chosen computer checks as my subsequent payment method. Excuse me. So there are several things here that we're going to kind of focus primarily on this page here. So there's a few things here we kind of need to focus on. Check date. So the date on the check is going to default to today's date. But if I want that date to print on my checks with a different date, I simply have to change the date right here. Now, this is a support question I get a fair amount from folks, is this is not the date of either the bill or the payment. Okay, so just an FYI that there's not a date, the date on check is not associated with any transactions in the software. It's just the date that we're asking it to print on the check. Perhaps it's the date we're asking the bank to honor the check, okay, assuming they look at it. But this date could be something completely different. So if I want to make this date March 1st, tomorrow, I absolutely can, okay? Next is the check layout. Church Windows supports two pre-formatted checks, check stub stub with a check on the top and stub check stub, okay? So always two stubs with one check. Check on top or check in the middle. One of the stubs, of course, is for the church or for you to keep as your hard copy of the check that was, with the check number that was printed and then subsequently sent to the vendor. And then one stub, of course, to go with the check for the vendor's records. Okay? So you have to decide which one of these two formats, check stub stub or stub check stub, your checks are, which format or style they are. There is no option to have any other check type or format supported in the software. It will only print one check and two stubs per page. Again, a common support call where the folks go, hey, Josh, our checks have 3 checks per page. Can we do that in Church Windows accounting? The simple answer is no. Okay? We do have, and we're not going to get into this today because that's not what today's webinar event is about, really, per se, is we'll have another event on this, is to the right of our check layout, you do have the button here called Check Designer. So if there are some adjustments or changes that need to be made to your checks because they may not print right in exactly the right same spots, we can use that Check Designer to manipulate and change the layout of the check. Okay, so maybe the date doesn't line up or the amount, or a common one is our checks come pre-printed with check numbers on them. We can use the Check Designer to remove the check number that Church Windows would print on it and simply assign them with the transaction if need be. Okay, just again, one simple example of where we might need to use the Check Designer, couple of simple examples of where we might need to use the Check Designer to maybe change our layout and get them to align correctly. Okay, but again, we're not going to be getting into the Check Designer today. Okay, then we have Asset with checks to print. So if I had posted payments to 2 different checking accounts, say, and I had checks to print from each of those, it would show them in this list. I don't. I only have one, my Huntington Bank checking account. Okay? So, but if I did, there would be 2. It would show whatever one was listed alphabetically first, and then the other one with other checks waiting to print. And I could choose that, and they would show 2 different lists of vendors, payees, and amounts. Okay? The other is our starting check number. We do have the Get Next Check Number function. We're now kind of talking at the very bottom here of page 40 that talks about the Get Next Check Number. So if your checks, computer checks, are all been entered and sequenced correctly, we should be able to click Get Next Check Number, and it will bring in what accounting perceives as the next available check number automatically as the next check number for our computer prepared checks. So in this case, 79111 is our next available check number in the correct sequence. Okay. Also, we do have the option, and this was newly added, I believe, in version 23 here, of show currency symbol on checks. Well, many times, your check printing company will automatically include a $sign pre-printed next to the amount on the checks. So if we've now given users the ability to be able to say, okay, I don't want Church Windows to print a currency symbol, in this case a $sign, on the amount or next to those amounts on there because my checks are now already come pre-printed with those. Okay. There down the left-hand side, we do like to point out, you do have full control over which checks you print and which you don't. Okay? So if I go, okay, I don't want to print my state tax liability account or my AEP bill, I can uncheck those and come back in and print those later. You do have full control over which of those you print and those you do not. So if you have some you don't want to print today, you can absolutely leave them in the print queue. Okay? So if I do check those again, it'll just put in the next check number, the check number automatically based on that. Okay? Can't change any information here regarding payee address, payee name, address information, or amount. We do have the memo line here. This is the memo, of course, that will print on the check itself, not in the comments. Okay, so if we go test memo, comments, memo, information here for AT&T, okay, what that'll do is it will actually print these comments, this memo information on the actual memo line on the physical check portion of the check itself. Otherwise, my comments that may be added or entered at my pay bills window will only print on the check stub, not on the check itself. Okay? So if I go down here and I would say, you know, could put in something like, you know, state tax ID. If I want, I mean, this is, you know, again, folks, this is your, you know, this is your data to, you know, to enter or to put on your checks as you need to. So here I could put in there if I want to. And now when I simply click print, of course, as it does with Church Windows always, the print button only opens up a preview of the report or the checks to be printed. It doesn't actually physically send it to your printer. That you have to do here. So we're looking at our AT&T bill, check number 7911. It is appearing first. So here, no invoice number, shows the amount. The comments that I had appended as part of my payment to appear will appear on both stubs, or appear on the stub. Oh yeah, there they are, monthly telephone expenses, telephone bill. And right here, let me get out my highlighter here, folks, to draw some focus, is my test memo. Okay, the information I'd entered on the memo line at the previous window where I was entering my starting check number. Okay. Again, that's on the memo line on the physical check itself. It's kind of hard to see here, but there's a little dash here on the left-hand side right there that's right here that's indicating where the page break occurs between our, or not the page break, but the perforation line or the line where the stub, the check ends and the stub begins, and it's like approximately like right here. Okay, and similarly true up here at the top, you've got the check somewhere on here where it ends and the stub begins. So if we kind of continue to go down our page here, so if we kind of scroll down, I think we went down to the bottom here, the one that I'd entered for my last one. Yeah, so my other comments for my state tax ID that I put on the memo line right here appears right here. So again, folks, this is all, these checks again are simply using the template stub check stub layout that Church Windows has created. For many folks that works, okay? So, but if not, you can use the check designer and you can find information in your help files on the check designer as well to change the layout here. But if we now then would click the print button in the upper left corner here to physically open up my printer driver, we're going to just kind of trick it into doing, you know, like it's going to send it to a printer. It's not actually printing anything. So I'm just trying to get some output created here. So let's just now cancel that. And now when we close out of our print checks window, I'm going to wait and I'm going to grab those checks off the printer to ensure that they're considered presentable, because when I now close out of my preview of my checks, it's going to now pop up with a message that asks me, did the checks print correctly? So even if I had one check that did not print correctly, I'm going to click no on this. Okay? So if I click no, it now opens this up, and I just always encourage folks to kind of pay attention to this, is notice it says on the window, it says indicate which checks, if any, printed correctly. Not incorrectly, correctly. So basically, I'm going to check the box next to those that did print correctly. Okay, so let's say AT&T did not, but the other 4 did. Again, which checks printed correctly, not the other way around. So I would printed correctly, again, it asks the question, printed correctly. So by checking the box, I'm telling the system that the check printed correctly, and that the ones that are unchecked, it did not, and it'll put those back into the print queue. Okay, so if now I click OK on that, it now removes the 4 that I did say did print correctly, and it leaves the 1 I did not, ready for me to print to a new check. Okay, if that check was ruined or something like that, or it was destroyed, the printer ate it or something, I might then have to go into accounting up here to other and enter spoiled checks to record that. Or if the check, it just say maybe skipped it and I can reuse 7911, okay, I can do that. So it says get next check number, so it did skip over 7911. It doesn't know what I did with that, okay? So I could, if 79111 is still good, I could re-put that in here and print to that check, okay, as long as the check stock is good, okay? If not, then I would have to go into enter spoiled checks, and then I would do my get next check number and have it do 79116, and then print that to my check stock if necessary. So it all depends on what happened with the actual physical check itself when I printed it. You've got full control here, folks, over what happens with these checks. Again, even if one did not print correctly, I would click no and then tell the system which ones did. If none of them did, I wouldn't check any of them. If none of them are considered presentable, I would have said no and then unchecked and that left none of them checked and click OK, and it would have put all 5 back in the print queue. Again, I might need to go back up to enter spoiled checks if they were rendered unpresentable or unusable for some reason, okay? So now I would just do my appropriate check number, print it, and again, respond accordingly, okay? And finally and it talks about that at the bottom of page 41 on there, about if check is ruined in the printer so that it cannot be reused or used at all, you'll have to go to transactions, other, and enter spoiled checks and record that, you know, as a general ledger entry with a $0 amount and a void status on that check automatically. As part of that, it'll account for that in your check stock. Definitely write void on across the check, put it in your folder with your other spoiled checks as needed in case you're asked to present them by an auditor, okay? So that is where we're going to leave it today, folks.